So yeah, this is a hot topic recently. It's changed a little bit since the call for papers, so don't take this so seriously. But still, the guys did do some things right, so let's see what we can learn from them. For example, that this clicker doesn't work. Okay, right now it does. Okay, so this thing here is a T-34 tank. It's the most popular tank ever, second most popular tank ever built in history. And well, it's supposed to be built in, I know, about 50,000 items in just during the Second World War alone. So it was really a tremendous success in some way. And right now, even now, there are those tanks in some remote areas of the world. They are still operating. So it was really a tremendous success, and they somehow did it really well. And this is a Royal Tiger. This is a German tank from the same period, and it was a high-tech beauty. It was really cool, but they only managed to produce a couple of hundred of them. So, well, what happened? This is a short summary of what the Germans managed to do with the tanks. They had three generations of tanks based on the Russian T-34. And first they built a couple of thousands of the Panthers. Then they had some mechanical problems. They fixed them. Then they designed a second generation, was called the Tiger. They built a little bit fewer of them. Then they designed a third generation, was the Royal Tiger, and they only built about 500. Well, why? Because with every other version, they kept redesigning the tanks, they kept building them from scratch, they made them bulkier, heavier, more complex, more fancy, more tricky, and, well, less robust. Well, in the meantime, the Russians kept simplifying their tanks. The first versions of the T-34 were a tiny bit refined. They had some interior finish even. Well, they weren't comfortable, but they were usable. And in the progress of the war, they kept making those tanks. Well, they were very crude at the end of the war. They had absolutely no non-essential features. They were stripped of totally everything except armor, except firepower, and, well, basically that's all they had. But as the Germans kept making their tanks more complicated, the Russians kept making it simpler. So they actually, even during the war, when you have basically no manufacturing capability, they managed to make their tanks, first of all, cheaper and faster to build, and even though they had no qualified personnel, because everybody qualified to make a tank actually rode one into battle. So they had just random people building tanks, and they made them cheap and somewhat reliable. So that was quite an achievement. And on a similar theme, this is a mortar. This is basically the simplest possible weapon you could ever imagine. It's a tube with two legs so it doesn't fall over. And that's it. Well, you can make it simpler if you are a Soviet weapon designer, because in general you use rifled barrels that make the projectile spin when you shoot it. And the Soviets used smoothbore ones. Well, why? Again, because that way you make this weapon even simpler. You make it faster to build. You make it cheaper. And, well, this one disadvantage that a smoothbore rifle is less accurate. You have less precision when firing, so it's more hit or miss. But it's not really that big of a problem, because you get 10 smoothbore mortars for a price of one rifled. So you just make 5 or 10 of them and point them roughly in the direction of the enemy. Just keep firing, and in the end, well, either you hit them or they go deaf eventually. So that's one way to solve it. Especially, the Soviets used very big projectiles in their mortars. Their smallest ones were bigger than the Americans from the Cold War, the largest one. So their calibers started after the Americans ended. So it was another factor that you didn't really have to aim that well. So you just had a tube and kept firing. Yeah, and this is a BMP 76PB. It's an infantry, armored infantry vehicle from the 60s, and some of those are still in service even in Poland. And when it was first introduced, the Western spies, the Western intelligence, were sure that this vehicle used a standard 76mm gun, because it was the Soviet standard. Every single Soviet army used it. But it turned out that it was a never seen before 73mm. So this designation was actually wrong. The 76 was from the 76mm. The PB, I have no idea what it stands for. But it turned out it was 73mm. So it started with pissing off this guy who, even though he looked like a hipster, he was the one guy you really didn't want to piss off in Soviet Russia. And well, it started with presenting to him a new kind of weapon, and that's where things went slightly wrong, because this is a kind of famous weapon. Its official name is the BM-13. It's more affectionately known as the Katyusha, as it has a K painted on it somewhere. But it was actually so secret that hardly anybody ever knew this thing existed before they saw it on the battlefield. So if you were on the wrong end of the rockets, it got to be called Stalin's organ. But during the test of this weapon, there were some problems, because this used 130mm rockets, and it was a very, very secret weapon. So when they ordered a 130mm ammunition to the test range, well, the problem is that the Soviets already had a 130mm gun, which is totally different ammo. So they delivered, well, wrong kind of ammunition, wrong kind of shells, and they had basically nothing to show off with this new rocket launcher. So the tests failed. Because this was another earlier construct. It was very popular. I'm not sure if any of those are in service to this day. There are some in museums. I think one is in Poland. So the supply guys delivered ammo for this instead of ammo for this, because they had no idea this ever existed. So Stalin did a very surprising thing and didn't execute anybody for this mistake. Well, but he did another rather smart thing, and he ordered to relabel all the ammunition for the Katyushas to 132mm. They didn't change anything at all in the ammo itself. The rockets were just as they were before. They just renamed it to 132. So from then on, you had no problems with the supply guys. If you requested 130s, you had the naval shells. If you requested 132s, you got the Katyusha rockets. So you didn't have to, educate your supply workers. What's a howitzer bomb? What's a mortar shell? What's a rocket? What's an anything? You just had a simple designation. So they had no way to make a mistake. That was earlier before, and that was the same reason when the BMP-1 was introduced. That BMP-1 was this real name. It couldn't use the earlier 76mm ammo, so they introduced a new caliber, and now they didn't have to, re-educate all the supply workers. What does this thing shoot? It shoots 73s, so that's all you need to know. Because during the war, supply is unreliable. You've got random people, war prisoners, schoolboys, and everybody handling your supply routes. So You just have to minimize the possibility of all kinds of errors. So that was one way the Soviets did it and actually did them good. Another thing you have to hand to the Russians, they really had focus. They decided that even in the nuclear age, tanks are going to be the primary offensive and defensive weapon. So all their weapon systems were designed to either fight tanks or defend against tanks or fight alongside tanks. So I don't know about submarines, but all the other stuff, I think, just was designed somehow around tanks. So yeah, the last time you see this BMP-1 here, this has this 73mm gun is capable of destroying lighter tanks. You know, in general, Western infantry vehicles used machine guns capable of attacking enemy infantry. The Soviets decided that it's really pointless if you have a vehicle in the battlefield that can't attack a tank, so why have it there? So they just put on a tank gun to this vehicle. In later versions, they also added a machine gun just to make sure. So why not? Again, this is a portable rocket launcher that every soldier is supposed to have, because again, tanks. So yeah, every military system except those submarines is equipped to fight tanks or against tanks or whatever. This is another example of their focus against tanks. This T-12 Taut anti-tank gun, which had a very sad nickname called Farewell Motherland, because the Soviets thought it was very important to hold the tanks in the, just stop, don't let them advance. So they made these anti-tank guns, they made them towed, they're not self-propelled, they don't have an engine to drive anywhere. Because that was the focus was, right now these guys don't have anywhere to hide, they can't run, they can't do anything, they have just to fight till the end. So so they did, and they always suffered heavy losses. That's why it was called Farewell Motherland. But still, they defended against tanks so that other units in the field could advance, could get some advantage. Yeah, one last thing. They also happened to learn from mistakes, as in the, I think 1969 there was a conflict between the Soviet Union and China about some scrap of land in the Siberia, and they noticed that they suffered very large losses, even though the fights weren't that fierce, because it turned out to be many of the troops simply froze to death. And also, it turns out that they've already forgotten the lessons from the Second World War, and they couldn't survive in harsh conditions like just sleeping in the snow without fire, without warm blankets or winter clothes. So what they did, they took all their troops and they sent them to Siberia for a couple of nights. Even those unlucky guys who were stationed in the desert, they just threw them all across the world to Siberia. They mostly survived. They still have an army, so I guess it worked. So at least they learned from that mistake. But still, this thing is about DevOps, right? So how does this thing at all relate to DevOps? Well, there's the universal answer to all the questions in the universe. It depends. Because, they did some good stuff we can learn, but, if you decide, I don't know, to make stuff simple and repeatable so you don't screw it up at 3 a.m. when it breaks, if you color code your cables so your production environment has red cables and test has blue, or you use distinct prompts, or you write postmortems after outages so that you don't repeat mistakes. Well, it's up to you. It's all, well, you have to find out what suits you. So thanks.